In the quiet hours before dawn, a beloved pastor's wife was found dead, staged in prayer beneath an ancient oak. Was this an act of faith, or something far more sinister? Who would stage such a macabre scene, and what dark secrets are they trying to hide? Imagine a place where the light of faith shines brightly, drawing in the weary, the hopeful, and the devout. In Atlanta's bustling heart, Trinity Church stands as a beacon, led by Pastor Jonathan Harris, renowned for his riveting sermons and the profound loyalty of his congregation. But beneath the surface of this spiritual sanctuary, an intricate web of deception quietly unfurls, masterminded by the very soul sworn to guide and protect his flock. But this story begins on a crisp spring dawn, not with songs of worship, but with a silence so heavy it suffocates. Laura Harris, wife of Pastor John, beloved by all, was found dead, her body arrayed beneath an ancient oak on church grounds. The scene was meticulously staged. She was positioned in a mock state of prayer, her hands cruelly bound with her own rosary beads. It was a morbid parody of piety, a sinister tableau that mocked the very essence of faith. As the light of day revealed the grotesque details of this scene, it became clear that this was no random act of violence. This was a message, a chilling declaration written in the language of calculated cruelty. The question then arises, how could a man of God, a pillar of the community, be implicated in such darkness? What drives a revered leader to orchestrate a nightmare from which there is no awakening? Join us as we descend into the heart of this darkness, unraveling a tale of power, betrayal, and unimaginable deceit. This is not just a story about the betrayal of faith or the corruption of a soul. It is a piercing inquiry into the shadows that lurk behind a community's most hallowed halls. We will strip away the veneer of sanctity to expose the profound truths hidden within Trinity Church, a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about morality, justice, and the human condition. Before we delve deeper into this web of intrigue, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now, let's crack this case wide open. As the congregation began to gather on that fateful morning, what was expected to be a routine day of worship transformed instantly into a scene of horror. The usually serene grounds of Trinity Church now hosted an unimaginable sight. Laura Harris, the wife of Pastor Jonathan Harris, lay motionless, an eerie stillness surrounding her form. Discovered under the protective branches of an old oak, her body was not merely placed, it was displayed with a chilling intentionality. Her hands, usually clasped in prayer, were instead bound by her own rosary beads, transforming a symbol of faith into one of confinement. The discovery sent shockwaves through the church community. The image of Laura, known for her unwavering kindness and her role as a spiritual mother to many, posed in such a grotesque parody of prayer, left her friends and fellow worshippers grappling with confusion and dread. The meticulous arrangement of the scene suggested a deliberate message or ritual, hinting at motives beyond simple violence. It posed a silent, ominous question to all who knew her. Who could commit such a sacrilegious act, and why? As investigators swarmed the site, the serenity of the church was shattered. Yellow tape flapped in the morning breeze, a stark contrast to the usual welcoming open doors. Detective Marcus Brown, a seasoned officer with years of experience in homicide investigations, took charge of the scene. His eyes, trained to seek out the hidden truths behind criminal acts, noted the precision of Laura's placement and the symbolic use of the rosary. These details were clues, whispering secrets about the perpetrator's familiarity with the victim and possibly a deeper, more personal vendetta. The congregation's grief was palpable, a thick cloud of sorrow mingling with the scent of the oak. Pastor John, when he arrived, seemed a figure of brokenness. His tall frame, usually erect with authority, now seemed to fold inward with grief. His face, etched with lines of shock and sorrow, contorted as he approached his wife's body. Yet, amidst this display of anguish, there were those who watched him with a sharpened eye of suspicion, stirred by the unsettling thought that within their trusted shepherd might dwell a wolf. Detective Brown, observing Pastor John's reactions and the reactions of those around him, sensed the undercurrents of tension and doubt. Each whisper, each furtive glance, each tear shed added layers to the narrative unfolding under the church's steeple. The detective knew that the answers to this grim puzzle lay in the intertwining lives of those who called Trinity Church their home. As the community reeled, the investigation pushed forward, peeling back layers of apparent sanctity to reveal the obscured truths that lay beneath. This grim discovery was only the beginning of a journey into the depths of human frailty and deceit. As the story of Laura Harris's untimely death unfolded, it would not only test the faith of the congregation, but also drag hidden sins into the light, challenging the very foundation of trust and belief that bound this community together. At the crime scene, while many wept openly, others could not help but notice the peculiarities that emerged, particularly in the behavior of Pastor John and his daughter Emily. The pastor's grief, though profound, had moments of inconsistency, his sobs sometimes giving way to a peculiar composure as he interacted with the investigators. Emily, standing beside her father, displayed an eerie calmness that seemed out of place amidst such chaos. Her reactions were measured, her expressions controlled, almost as if she were performing a well-rehearsed role in a tragic play. As Detective Brown took statements, the congregation's whispers grew louder. Some noted how Emily watched, not with the shock or confusion one might expect, but with an analytical detachment. When asked to provide details of the last time she saw her mother alive, Emily's account was flawlessly coherent, devoid of the usual faltering that marks genuine recollections of traumatic events. Her precision struck Detective Brown as unusual, her narrative too polished for a supposedly spontaneous recounting. Even as Pastor John consoled his congregation, his interactions seemed to bear a layer of calculation, his eyes frequently meeting those of his daughter, as if seeking affirmation or providing reassurance. This subtle exchange did not go unnoticed by the keen-eyed detective, who was beginning to piece together an unsettling possibility: that the grief displayed by father and daughter might be a facade masking darker truths. The community, torn between their respect for Pastor John and the unsettling scenes unfolding before them, struggled with doubt and disbelief. The more discerning members of the congregation recalled past instances where Pastor John's decisions had seemed unusually influenced by Emily, hinting at an uncommonly close and potentially manipulative relationship. John said, "These observations compounded the mystery, weaving a complex tapestry of emotion and intrigue that suggested that the truth behind Laura Harris's death might involve more than just an external perpetrator." The detective's suspicions deepened, prompting him to delve further into the family dynamics, convinced that understanding the undercurrents between father and daughter could be key to unraveling the case. As the investigation continued, the community watched, the weight of suspicion casting long shadows across the bonds that had once seemed unbreakable. As the investigation into Laura Harris's death intensified, Detective Brown directed a more thorough search of the church premises. It was during this search that a critical discovery was made in an old, seldom-used part of the basement. Tucked away behind a false panel, a cache of photographs and video recordings was uncovered. The contents of these recordings were chilling. Videos showed Pastor John engaging in what appeared to be private, intense counseling sessions with various members of the congregation. However, it was the sessions with his daughter, Emily, that caught the detective's attention. The footage depicted a series of psychological manipulations, with Pastor John using his influence to shape and control Emily's perceptions and memories. They described him as loving, patient, supervised, encouraging. Further examination of the photographs revealed a disturbing pattern. They documented Emily at various stages of her life, each image mirroring earlier photographs of her mother, Laura. The settings, poses, and even the clothes were identical. It was as if Pastor John was attempting to mold Emily into a precise replica of her late mother, controlling not just her actions, but her very identity. These discoveries provided a horrifying glimpse into the depths of Pastor John's manipulation, suggesting that his control over Emily was both profound and deeply disturbing. This manipulation extended beyond simple paternal influence. It was a calculated effort to dominate and reshape a person's identity for reasons yet unknown. Armed with this new evidence, Detective Brown confronted Emily with the photographs and videos. Her reaction was a complex mix of shock, recognition, and a dawning realization of the extent of her father's deception. The manipulation was so deeply ingrained that Emily struggled to differentiate between the orchestrated interactions with her father and her genuine feelings and memories. This breakthrough not only propelled the investigation forward, but also began to unravel the psychological hold Pastor John had on his daughter. It raised critical questions about consent, influence, and victimhood, painting a portrait of a man who used his spiritual authority for deeply personal and perverse manipulations. The community, once bound by his charismatic leadership, now faced the daunting task of reconciling the man they revered with the manipulator exposed by the evidence, hidden beneath the very sanctuary they had trusted as a place of refuge and spiritual guidance. With the grim cache of manipulation uncovered beneath the church, Detective Marcus Brown turned his focus back to the scene of Laura Harris's death. He revisited the photographs and reports from the initial crime scene investigation, where Laura was found positioned under the oak tree. His experienced eye caught the deliberate staging of her body, not merely set but precisely arranged in what seemed a clear and chilling attempt to communicate something beyond a straightforward act of murder. Every detail of the scene was crafted with intention. The way Laura's hands were tied with her rosary beads, her body oriented towards the church as if in final supplication, and even the selection of the tree under which she was placed, all spoke to a mind that was not just ending a life, but conveying a message through its ending. Detective Brown speculated that the positioning might have biblical connotations or personal significance within the context of Pastor John's sermons, which often emphasized themes of sacrifice and redemption. This line of thinking led him to scrutinize Pastor John's recent sermons and writings more closely, searching for any references or symbols that might correlate with the specifics of the crime scene setup. His investigation revealed that the oak tree under which Laura was found had been mentioned several times in Pastor John's addresses to his congregation, often symbolizing strength and endurance in the face of adversity. This connection suggested that the choice of location was symbolic, reinforcing the idea that the staging was meant to resonate with, or send a signal to, those familiar with Pastor John's teachings. As Detective Brown pieced together these insights, he began to construct a theory that the murder scene was not only a display of control, but also an act embedded with a deeper, more personal message, possibly intended for the congregation or even directly for Emily, tying back to the disturbing dynamics revealed in the hidden videos and photographs. This meticulous setup pushed the investigation in new directions, focusing not just on who could have committed the crime, but why they would choose to layer it with such specific references and symbols, turning a personal tragedy into a public spectacle. As Detective Marcus Brown delved deeper into the elaborate setup of the crime scene, his attention was redirected by a startling new discovery. During the continued search of the Harris household, A hidden digital camera was found in Laura's personal study. Upon examination, it revealed a series of secret recordings made by Laura in the weeks leading up to her death. These videos, fraught with urgency and fear, captured Laura detailing her growing concerns about Pastor John's increasingly erratic and controlling behavior. In these clandestine recordings, Laura spoke directly to the camera, her voice often just above a whisper, as she confided her fears about the man she once trusted implicitly. She revealed how Pastor John's private demeanor had shifted from that of a loving husband to one marked by obsessions and dark compulsions. Laura expressed her alarm over his manipulation of Emily and how it was escalating beyond her control. She worried about the psychological games he played, not just with their daughter, but with other members of the church as well. Laura also mentioned specific instances where she felt Pastor John had overstepped the boundaries of his pastoral duties, using his influence to sway and control the personal lives of his congregation members. She hypothesized that his actions were not just a betrayal of their marital vows, but a sinister pivot toward something much darker, possibly criminal. Crucially, Laura hinted at having uncovered something even more damning, an upcoming event or decision that Pastor John had planned, which she believed could bring harm to many, though she stopped short of detailing this in the videos. Her intention to find more evidence and expose him was clear. These secret warnings painted a starkly different picture of the household dynamics and offered a new lens through which Detective Brown viewed the murder scene. It became apparent that Laura's death might have been a preemptive strike by Pastor John to silence her, fearing that his own secrets were on the verge of being exposed, not only to their daughter, but to the entire congregation. Armed with this new evidence, Detective Brown intensified his scrutiny of Pastor John, understanding that the investigation was no longer just a murder case, but a probe into a much deeper, more systemic pattern of abuse and manipulation that threatened the very core of the community Trinity Church served. Following the revelations in Laura's secret recordings, Detective Marcus Brown deepened his investigation into the dynamics between Pastor John and his daughter Emily. The hidden videos beneath the church had already revealed a disturbing level of manipulation, but Laura's recordings added layers of urgency and context to Emily's situation. It became clear that Emily's role in both the church and their personal life was not merely a product of familial grooming, but part of a calculated effort by Pastor John to mold her into a specific image, the image of her late mother, Laura. This was corroborated by the matching photographs found, which documented Emily's life mirroring her mother's past, down to the very poses and settings. John looked at the photographs and said, "Yeah, the face image matches the voices and some of the words." She nodded. Detective Brown uncovered further evidence that Emily's education, social interactions, and even her spiritual beliefs had been meticulously orchestrated by Pastor John. Her responsibilities at the church, which included leading certain committees and youth programs, were roles that Laura had once filled. This was not a simple case of a daughter following in her mother's footsteps. It was a deliberate act of replacement, engineered with precision. Det considered the matter afterward. Any further investigation he could not endure. The psychological impact on Emily was profound. Interviews with church members and friends revealed that Emily often expressed feelings of confusion about her identity and her role in the church. Her public persona was that of a devoted daughter and burgeoning church leader, but privately she struggled with anxiety and a sense of entrapment. Detective Brown consulted with psychologists who specialized in family manipulation and control dynamics. They suggested that Pastor John's behavior could be indicative of coercive control, a pattern of emotional and psychological abuse aimed at dominating and controlling a person. This form of abuse often involves conditioning a person to align their actions and thoughts with the abuser's desires, effectively robbing them of their autonomy. With this understanding, Detective Brown viewed Emily not only as a key witness, but potentially as another victim of Pastor John's manipulative practices. The detective's approach to Emily shifted. He treated her interactions with care, aiming to gently uncover the full extent of her father's control without further traumatizing her. The investigation took a stunning turn when Detective Brown accessed sealed adoption records and conducted a DNA test that led to an explosive revelation. Emily was not biologically related to Laura Harris. Instead, she was the daughter of Rachel Turner, a woman who had mysteriously disappeared from the community many years earlier under troubling circumstances. Rachel had been a member of Pastor John's congregation, and over time she became one of his closest followers, often seen seeking his guidance. Further digging into Rachel Turner's past revealed that she had been involved in a secretive relationship with Pastor John, which resulted in her pregnancy. The situation was kept hidden from the church and even from Rachel's family. Tragically, Rachel disappeared shortly after giving birth, her absence explained away by Pastor John as a move to another state for a new start. A story that, at the time, no one had reason to question. The truth was far darker. Detective Brown uncovered that Rachel had been sent to a remote, privately owned property of Pastor John under the guise of a spiritual retreat during her pregnancy. It was there that she gave birth to Emily, and shortly afterward she was forced into a situation that led to her sudden and unexplained disappearance. Pastor John then arranged for Emily to be brought to his home, fabricating a story of legal adoption to cover the true nature of her origins. The community was shocked by the discovery of Emily's true parentage. For Emily, this revelation was devastating. It upended her understanding of who she was and the role she had been made to play. The psychological manipulation she endured took on a new, more sinister dimension, as it became clear that Pastor John had orchestrated her life down to the most intimate details. Confronted with this reality, Emily's sense of betrayal deepened. The investigation provided her with a painful clarity about the lengths her father had gone to control her life and erase her true identity. As these truths came to light, Emily began to cooperate more fully with Detective Brown, driven by a newfound determination to uncover the full extent of her father's manipulations and crimes. At the trial of Pastor Jonathan Harris, the courtroom was charged with an atmosphere of intense scrutiny and anticipation. As the proceedings commenced, the prosecution laid out a detailed case, presenting a timeline of Pastor John's manipulative actions not only towards his family, but also towards his congregation. Central to the case were the disturbing revelations about his treatment of Emily, his late wife Laura, and Rachel Turner, whose story was pieced together through testimonies and evidence unearthed during the investigation. The trial exposed a pattern of coercive control that Pastor John exercised over Emily, manipulating every aspect of her life, from her childhood through to her adult years. Witnesses, including former church members and staff, testified to the unnatural closeness between Pastor John and Emily, and how her behavior and decisions seemed perpetually influenced by her father's directives. Videos found hidden beneath the church were shown, revealing the psychological sessions where Pastor John employed religious and emotional manipulation to mold Emily's identity to his design. Moreover, experts in psychology testified about the effects of such manipulation, explaining how Pastor John's actions constituted severe emotional and psychological abuse, which left long-lasting impacts on Emily's mental health. They discussed the concept of coercive control in the context of Pastor John's actions, helping the jury understand the sophisticated nature of his abuse. Additionally, the prosecution brought to light Pastor John's actions toward his congregation. Financial records and personal testimonies illustrated how he exploited his members for monetary gain and personal power. Several church members came forward, some reluctantly, to recount instances where Pastor John had pressured them into making large donations or manipulated them into unpaid labor for the church under the guise of spiritual duty. The revelations about Rachel Turner were particularly harrowing, The jury learned of her isolation during pregnancy, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, and how Pastor John falsified adoption papers to claim Emily as his own daughter. This segment of the trial not only painted a picture of a man who used his spiritual authority for deeply personal and immoral purposes, but also highlighted his capacity for premeditated deceit and harm. As the evidence mounted, Pastor John's defense struggled to counter the overwhelming array of testimonies and material evidence. His attorneys attempted to discredit witnesses and suggest alternative explanations for his behavior, but the consistent pattern of his actions, laid bare by the prosecution, painted a compelling portrait of guilt. Following the conviction of Pastor Jonathan Harris, the community and those directly affected by his actions began the slow process of healing and rebuilding. At the forefront of this transformation was Emily, who, in the wake of her father's trial and the truths uncovered, decided to reclaim her identity fully. She legally changed her last name to Turner, honoring her biological mother, Rachel Turner, and distancing herself from the man who had manipulated her life from the start. Empowered by her own experiences and the trial's revelations, Emily founded a support group named Voices Reclaimed. This group was dedicated to helping victims of spiritual and psychological abuse find healing and justice. The group quickly became a safe haven for many who had suffered under the guise of religious authority, providing resources, counseling, and a platform to share their stories. Emily's efforts shone a light on the often overlooked aspect of abuse within religious communities, challenging other institutions to take a closer look at their leaders and the power dynamics at play. Voices Reclaimed also worked to change legislation, pushing for stricter oversight of religious organizations and better protection for congregation members from predatory practices. Emily became a vocal advocate for these changes, using her story to illustrate the urgent need for reform. The legacy of truth that Emily and the trial of Pastor John helped establish became a beacon for many seeking to understand and rectify the abuses hidden behind piety. Her work not only transformed her personal agony into a force for communal good, but also inspired others to come forward and demand accountability and transparency within their spiritual communities. This is the complete scientific story of the experiment on us all. Emily's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact of truth in the face of deceit. As she continues to lead Voices Reclaimed, her efforts are a testament to the possibility of recovery and redemption. Have you or someone you know ever experienced manipulation or abuse within a religious or community setting? How did it affect your or their relationship with that community? What measures do you think should be implemented to prevent leaders in power from exploiting their positions? How important is it for victims of such abuses to find a supportive community for healing? Can sharing personal stories in groups like Voices Reclaimed truly help others? Emily chose to reclaim her identity by changing her last name and publicly confronting the past. How do you view this decision, and what would you do in her place to move forward from such profound betrayal? If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Next time, we'll uncover another case where betrayal, secrets, and unimaginable decisions changed lives forever.